Welcome to Language Surfers Podcast, a space with fresh waves for the mind, dedicated to create a platform where professionals from both language industry and academia can share their professional experiences, and where we also explore different career paths at different stages. Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Language Surfers Podcast. My guest for today is Alicia Rueda-Acedo, and she's an associate professor of Spanish at the University of Texas at Arlington. Alicia, thank you so much for accepting the invitation and being today with us here to share your professional story.
Thank you, Anka. The pleasure is mine. I'm so thankful for your invitation.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time and being here with us. So, Alicia, before we start, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself? Where are you from? What have you studied? Where are you living currently?
Okay. I am from Seville in Spain, and I live in Arlington, Texas, which is a big city between Dallas and Fort Worth in the north area of Texas in the United States. I am an associate professor of Spanish. I am the director of the Community Spanish Translation and Interpreting Program here at my institution, the University of Texas at Arlington. And I created a translation and interpreting program. But I offer a variety of courses from medical Spanish to Spanish cinema, conversation, grammar, composition, translation, and interpreting. I received my PhD in Hispanic language and literatures from the University of California in Santa Barbara, and I also hold a BA in journalism from the University of Seville and a BA in translation and interpreting from the University of Granada in Spain.
Oh, that's so impressive. And I think it was hard also to obtain all these degrees, right?
It was hard. Back in the 90s, when I got into the BA in journalism, you needed a really high GPA to get into journalism. I should have studied Hispanic philology, but I say, oh, they only require a 5. I have such a good GPA. I'm going to do journalism. And then I regret it because when I was in the second year of that BA in journalism, I was like, no, I don't want to be a journalist. But anyway, I finished it, and I'm glad I did because most of my scholarly work is about literary journalism. So I'm glad I finished the degree. The last year of my studies in journalism at the University of Seville, I spent it in Berlin at the University of the Arts, thanks to an Erasmus scholarship. And then I realized that I wanted to do something related to languages. So that's why when I came back to Spain, I decided to try to get accepted into the University of Granada to complete the last 2 years of translation and interpreting, because back in the time, if you had already a BA, a licenciatura, you could finish the career of translation and interpreting in 2 years, and I was accepted and I completed it. The last year of my studies in Granada, I was an exchange student in Santa Barbara at the University of California in Santa Barbara. I was lucky enough to meet my dissertation advisor, Dr. Sara Herrera, who is a member of the Spanish Academy of Language in Mexico, and probably the best well-known scholar in Mexican studies. And I've been privileged to study with her. And that's why now when I think if I were 18, I will go to Hispanic philology because that is my passion. But I ended up doing my PhD in Hispanic literature, and now I'm privileged enough to combine all my studies: translation, interpreting, journalism, and Hispanic philology, and I do it
Oh,
in my.
that's a nice mixture.
Uh-huh. I can teach it, and I do research as well. So it's been a very interesting and diverse path for me, but I'm glad to combine everything that I have studied.
That's so nice and so great to see that you were able to, in the end, combine all of these aspects of what you studied into your current professional life.
It is.
And you mentioned that even though you studied journalism, there was a specific moment when you said that this is no longer for me. How did you realize that?
I didn't like the courses that I was taking. I worked at I'm not going to say the name of the newspaper, but I worked in one newspaper, and that was not a nice experience at all. And then the only thing I miss and I will back to is radio. I wouldn't mind working as a radio journalist, but that will be it. I don't like television, and definitely I don't like the pressure of written journalism. And then I realized I will never be Rosa Montero or Elena Poniatowska. So I said, definitely, this is not for me. But I had the privilege to work at the European Parliament at the Rapid Response Unit under the Robert Schuman grant, where I also had the chance to work as a translator, as an interpreter. And it was so stressful that that was like my main moment. I said, no, I'm not going to be a journalist. No, I'm not going to be a translator. A translator, I'm still a translator. I translate pro bono for many different organizations in my area, so I still do translation. But interpreting, after working at the European Parliament and then at the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, I decided that that was not my profession, although I enjoy teaching it. So I've been privileged enough to be working in different settings and different places, and now that I have this job in the academia, I'm glad that I can combine everything, although not as a professional practitioner, but at least as a scholar and teacher, which I enjoy.
Yeah,
Teaching is a
definitely.
great part of my job.
And that's great when you look backwards, right, to your career. And
Hmm.
I think that one of the things that uh, anyone can appreciate in such context, as you mentioned, that you started to study something, then you realize that this is no longer for you, but
Yeah.
still you had this enough strength to finish the study, right?
Yeah.
So, how was that moment? What made you still continue and finish that degree?
Fear. My parents told me, don't study journalism. You're not going to like it. Oh, that's what I want to be. I want to be a journalist. And I was like, how am I going to tell my parents that after 2 years at the university, I'm not going to complete this degree because I don't like it? So I said, I'm going to finish it. And then I saw the Erasmus program, say, wow, if I go abroad, that might be fun. But back in the 90s, Erasmus was starting, and my university, my degree, journalism, we only had three positions available, two in England and one in Germany. And when I talked to the professors, they told me, well, it is too competitive to get into the English universities. Why don't you try with Berlin? Nobody applies. I said, yeah, but I don't speak a word of German. I said, well, we only request one semester. I said, I can't do that. So I went to Berlin with one completed semester of German. Can you imagine how crazy it was? But I'm glad, I'm fortunate to have done it. It was crazy. Now I know. But because I got there, I was like, I don't understand a word. Why
Different country, different culture, different language.
completely and say, and I went to class and I was like, what's going on? I don't understand anything. So I changed all my subjects to video producing, photography, portrait, because I could not speak or write in the language. But German became my obsession. I say, I'm gonna learn this language. So I took all free German courses in different churches, different mosques. I went to all kind of gatherings where German was spoken for free because I didn't have money. The moment I got a job cleaning in an office, I spent that money just learning German. Like
Wow.
it was my obsession. So I'm glad I did it. Your question was what I will tell a student who is in a degree that doesn't like.
Yes.
I will say quit.
Would it be better to quit?
The recommendation would be just quit. Have the courage to quit. One thing I like about American universities that I like and I don't like at the same time. In Spain, for example, and other European countries, there is a degree plan and
Mhm.
it's very structured. First year, all these courses, you have some space for electives. Second year, this is what you have to take, a few spaces for electives. But here in the United States, you're free to choose. So
Wow.
if you start something and you don't like it, it's okay. You still got the credit. You still can use those credits and change majors. And I find that amazing
Yeah. Yeah.
because that for someone like me who was in the wrong place, that would be amazing. Okay, I want to be a journalist, but still I can go to modern languages and complete another degree or another maybe history because I took a lot of history classes while studying journalism. I don't know. different systems with different possibilities, but I think having flexibility it's important.
Yeah, definitely. And especially because we're just so young at that age. You
Yes,
think you might like something, and then you just get into this reality where I no longer like, what do I do? So
exactly.
it's extremely useful to have this flexibility that you mentioned.
And it can be really frustrating. So another recommendation is like, if you really want to know if you're going to like this, volunteer. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
just go and say, hey, I would like to have this internship. If your university is not offering internships or service learning components, just go and contact employers and contact companies or nonprofit organizations that are related to your field of study and say, hey, I want to work here. I want to collaborate to see if this is my career, because
Mm-hmm.
it can be really frustrating. Absolutely, yes. Mhm.
Definitely, definitely. And this is always better to do it as soon as possible so that you really identify and put yourself in the right career path.
Yes. And probably product of my frustration has been my passion to create collaborations with nonprofits organizations in my area and with internships and service learning components, because I want my students to know beforehand, before they graduate, if this is a career for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of them, when they graduate, there's a lot of anxiety, like, I don't have experience as a translator or as an interpreter. We provide them the opportunity while studying their career with all these collaborations, so they can say, this is not for me, or
Yeah.
this is my passion, and I'm going to pursue it. So I think it's very important. First of all, I think universities should be providing the opportunities to their students, but
Mm-hmm.
if they're not, be proactive and
Exactly.
contact organizations and companies and say, hey, I really want to collaborate to see if this is my field, if this is the career I want to pursue for the rest of my career path. Mhm.
Yeah, that's really lovely to hear that you have such bridge between the university and NGOs with such a, I suppose, a big social impact, right?
Yes, absolutely. We are in a privileged area in Texas and in
Mm-hmm.
North Texas in particular. Just to give you some numbers, in the United States, there are 62 million people who are Hispanic, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And over 40 million people speak the language. United States is the second largest Spanish speaking country in the world after Mexico. So it's a reality. And by 2050, one in three people here will speak Spanish. Right now, just in Texas, we are the largest the demographic group. When I say we, I mean Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
And over 7 million people Spanish speak. There are more than 7 million people here in Texas that speak Spanish. So there are more Spanish speakers here than in Panama or Nicaragua. So it is a reality. And when you analyze the situation of community translation and community interpreting and healthcare interpreting in particular, and legal translation in particular, and educational, sorry, or translation and interpreting in school settings, it is amazing. The lack of professionals, the lack of trained translations, of trained translators and interpreters who are working in these settings. So the need is real. And one at a certain point, after creating the first certificate in translation here at my university, I say we need to connect with the community. We cannot be in the ivory tower just
Mm-hmm.
teaching translation and interpreting when people are dying at the hospital, or 5 years olds are telling their parents, you have cancer, you're going to die in 3 months, because that's the reality here. It's happening. So the majority of my students are connected to this profession because they've been translating and interpreting for their parents and family members since they were
Mm-hmm.
able to speak.
Yeah.
And, I teach medical Spanish, and one of the questions that I ask them is, have you ever translated or interpreted for your parents or family members at the medical settings? And 97% say yes.
Yeah.
So the need is there, and we can help. So we started back in 2011, offering community translation services and community interpreting services to our community, and it's been a wonderful incorporation into our degree program, and students really enjoy it, and it's a win-win for
Yes, exactly.
students, for community members,
For the
for
university
clients of
also.
people who are in need of language services is really a huge impact. Mhm.
Yeah, that's so great that you do, and congratulations on this initiative. I think that more universities would need to have something like that. And there's one question I would like to address
Mhm.
you, because in one of my previous episodes, I had a guest from Spain, and she explained us a bit about the Spanish academic system.
Yep.
So I think it would be very good for the listeners to hear what is the American system, how is it, how can one can get to be a full-time professor to obtain a tenure track. Could you just explain us, walk us through what would be the American system and
Of
how
course.
difficult is it?
Okay, nowadays is really difficult. I'm going to describe it briefly. Mainly, we have three kinds of positions at an American universities. Tenure track positions, for those you need a PhD, and the slogan, what you have to do is publish or perish. Okay, um, that's tenure.
Correct.
Obviously, we have to do good teaching and good service, but I mean, the main component of these positions is publishing in peer-reviewed top journals, etc. I can go into details later if you wish. Then we have non-tenure track positions. Usually, you also require a PhD to apply for one of those,
Mhm.
and they are not focused towards publications. They are more oriented towards service and teaching. And then we have adjuncts. So you might have a PhD. The case is that more people with PhDs are now getting these positions because there are not enough tenure track positions anymore. But with a master degree, you can teach as an adjunct. So those are the three main positions at American universities. In order to succeed in a tenure track position, obviously you need to be lucky enough to get one of those. When I got mine back in 2005, there were 400 positions available for PhDs in Hispanic literature. I got this position in translation and interpreting, and it was the only one offered that
Wow.
year. And I was lucky enough. But back in 2005, it was very rare to find someone with a PhD in translation and interpreting
Yes.
in the United States. So me having just a BA, I was a really strong candidate.
Mhm.
Nowadays, it's different because there are a lot of people, or more people, with PhDs in translation and interpreting than it was back in the beginning of the century. So in order to succeed, you have a tenure clock.
Mhm.
After 5 years, you need to go up for tenure. It depends on the institution, depending if the institution is research one, research two. It depends. If you have more focus on teaching than in research, it can vary. But in
Mhm.
my case, you needed to publish a book and 10 articles in order to be considered for tenure. And then
And sorry to interrupt. Do you also have to pass an exam? Do you have an interview, or is just curriculum based on these
it's
requirements?
curriculum based, but you have to write a narrative.
Okay.
Okay, you have to write a narrative. That narrative is sent to external reviewers. People
Mhm.
do not know you in your field, and they need to write a letter. So you send them your narrative, like this is what I've done, this is the impact of the things that I have published. They evaluate of that, and they read your work. When
Mhm.
you are reviewing a tenure case, it's a lot of work. So the external evaluators, at least five or six of them, need to review your case. Your own department will review your case. Your college will review your case. Your university will review your case. And based on all these reviewers, and mainly the external reviewers, because it's a very impartial system, and I like it very much about American universities. Is your colleagues outside your institution, people who do not know you personally, the ones that are going to evaluate you. And
Mhm.
based on those letters, you get tenure or not.
Okay.
Also, it's very important to be a good teacher. We have evaluations, student evaluations that are taken seriously. And that's something I really, really like about this system. When I hear in Spain that professors get crazy about the idea that students are going to write evaluations, I'm like, that's what this should be done. I mean,
Fair, right?
what
You
else?
need students
No,
should
and
also be able to evaluate you.
it drives me nuts. Like, seriously, you don't want to be evaluated by your own students? who else can evaluate your teaching? I mean,
Exactly.
because we have also observations. We have to have peer teaching evaluations. So we have professors who come and evaluate your
Mhm.
teaching, and they write a report and all that. But students are talking about you, and believe me, I pay close attention to my student evaluations. I really get their feedback, and if I see something and they're right, and if two of them say the same thing, even though I do not agree, I have to change it because they are saying it. And it's one more because one crazy guy can say, she's crazy, she didn't show up. So, okay. But if someone is saying the same thing and someone else is like, okay,
Let's
I'm
look into
gonna
this.
consider, I'm gonna consider this. So
Mhm.
yes, student evaluations are essential to be a good teacher. And then service, and we have a lot of service. I've been in parking committee, for instance, like crazy.
Mhm.
And then there are other services that I love. For example, I'm the outreach coordinator for the community in my department, and I love talking to nonprofits and companies and stuff like that. So yeah, it's very hard. And then from there, depending on the institution, you go from associate to full professor. And
Mhm.
in some institution, full professorship has different steps. For example, the University of California system, you have 6 steps that you can apply for. And we have, after we get tenure, we have annual evaluations. Same thing, we need to write a narrative, present copies of all the things that we have published,
Wow.
present student evaluations, and address issues that you might have had. And also, we need to talk about our service and how we have helped at different levels: departmental level, college level, university level, and community level. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much for explaining. And I would have another question related to this. So once you get, for example, a tenure track and you're a full professor also,
Uh-huh.
um, are you able to work, collaborate with another university or a private company and get paid? I mean, additional income to say so. Or is it that once you are tenure track with the university, that's the only official and single contractual agreement that you can have, and only the only one that can pay you, but you cannot have additional
It is
income.
it is negotiable, and you always need to report it to your university and get permission to do so. For example, I teach a course for the University of Salamanca in Spain. I teach
Mhm.
literary journalism, and that is totally okay. I got the approval from my institution. I was invited to teach this course, and I was happy to do so. So I do it every year. And yes, I'm paid, and but I need the permission from my institution.
Okay, but at least you've got that chance, right?
Yes, you get, and also, there are people who have patents.
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, so yes, as long as you are open with the university and you ask or request permission. I mean, and there are a lot of limitations. It's not that you can work everywhere, or you can use your credentials as a professor at a certain institution to get another job, or to get I don't know, some benefits. It is very regulated. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's very regulated, but there are opportunities to do so.
Yeah, that's great to know. That's great to
Mhm.
know. And you mentioned that you have a lot of collaborations with NGOs.
Yes.
For those one, do you also need the approval from the university? Are there agreements? How is the context, the framework in
It-
which you can set this? How difficult is it? Are there, I don't know, funding involved? How can you involve students in? Because there are, I suppose, like personal stories where you get students maybe to interpret, right?
yes. Mhm.
How is this set up?
There are different routes to go. For example, what I enjoy a lot is service learning. I don't know if you are familiar with service learning or not, but service learning is a part of experiential learning, and is when students are part of a course where they get credit to collaborate with, in my case, it's always a nonprofit.
Mhm.
The activity is organized, and we need to identify a community need. In this case, the community need obviously is translation and or interpreting. And then I need to teach in my course what students are going to be doing in the nonprofit. For example, my students have been collaborating with Proyecto Inmigrante, which is a nonprofit organization for counseling immigration services, since 2014. We have provided more than 5,000 hours to this
Wow.
nonprofit organization, translating birth certificates, death certificates, um, doctor notes, all kinds of documents that, even though they might not be legal documents, become legal documents during an immigration process.
Exactly. Mhm.
So I teach those documents in class, and students go to Proyecto Inmigrante and they translate for them at least 25 hours. They need to complete the hours in order to receive credit, and they need to get feedback from the nonprofit
Mm.
in order to get a grade. So they are teaching, sorry, they're taught by me, but also by the staff at the nonprofit organization. And this is amazing because students get a better appreciation of the discipline, and they also have a professional opportunity to see if they want to become translators, or at
Exactly.
least legal translators. And also they gain a sense of civic responsibility. They know they're helping their communities, and they know that they are impacting their communities. So it also changes the dynamic of the courses,
Mhm.
because students see that they have a social mission, and they are participating actively in in what they're doing, and also they are meeting a community need. So it's a wonderful
It's very rewarding, I suppose.
it's very rewarding, and the clients, and this collaboration is also beautiful for me because it's done through the connection with the CEO of Proyecto Inmigrante, who was a student of mine
Wow.
many years ago. So being able to work with your former students is amazing. And at the same time, he approached me and said, Alicia, well, he always called me Dr. Rueda. And he called me Alicia. That never happened. My clients are being charged hundreds of dollars for bad translators undertaken by notary publics. And notary publics in the States are people who have their signature legalized. They're
Mhm.
not, they're not notary publics as in Spain, for example. So, we're talking about people who hardly has people hardly have the money to pay for immigration fees. So they're gonna be taken advantage of with the translation and say, I'm gonna help you. I don't know how, but I'm gonna do it. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna do this through service learning. And in the United States, service learning is really well established. There is a national clearinghouse for service learning, and almost each institution has a service learning center. We have a
Okay.
service learning center here in my university, and they provide you all kinds of forms and agreements that a student need to sign in
Mhm.
order to participate in service learning. So we have all these already in place. Like I don't have to worry about a contract that says, well, I'm going to be driving from UTA to this nonprofit organization. If something happens to me, UTA is not responsible. So I get my students to sign all documents. They need to report all the number of hours that they have completed. And then we celebrate. We always bring community members, and we have organized, for example, El Día del Niño, Children's Day. We have organized um, other events where parents come and students join the celebration. So it's very community oriented, and it's a very rewarding opportunity. We have more than 35 community partners, including
Wow.
school
35.
districts, including nonprofits organizations and clinics. And then we have internships. Okay, internships are harder to create. Some of them are paid. For example, we have translation agencies that offer our students paid internships. We work also with Mary Kay, the makeup company. They
Mhm.
translate, our students have an internship where they translate and localize their products for Latin America. Um, we collaborate with big hospitals, and that's the difficult agreement because of HIPAA, which is the confidentiality law that
Mhm.
regulates US hospitals, privacy. And then for example, in order to have an agreement signed by UTA and the hospital, it takes like 2 years at least of
Too long.
negotiations back and forwards because, you're sending students to a hospital,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of. And so yeah, it's been hard, but now I'm glad to have internships with Parkland. So not that's my goal, Parkland. Parkland is a community hospital, the biggest community hospital in the area, that treats people uninsured or underinsured. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of Hispanic population in that hospital. But no, we haven't yet finished the agreement. We're working.
Yes, you said it
we,
well yet.
we try many times, but still in process. But we work with UT Southwestern, which is a big hospital. It's one of the best hospitals in Texas, and I'm glad to know that we were able to finish this agreement. And we work with Children's Hospital in Dallas as well. So we have the opportunity to send students to shadow interpreters, and
Mhm.
some of them they're even able to interpret when they meet the requirements. So those are the hardest aspects of hospitals and paid internships, obtaining paid internships, but it's worth the effort.
That's great, and I'm just so impressed of how many initiatives you have, and the energy needed to obtain all these. But in
It's
the all of these objectives, but in the end, I think that everything comes to such a rewarding experience, and you see the fruits, the seeds,
and
right, that you planted.
it's my favorite part of my profession. I mean, uh, you say, "Oh, but you have published an article." Yeah, nice. But the feeling of seeing parents and clients and being involved with the community, that is so
Yeah,
rewarding. I
that,
mean, there's no way to describe. This is the favorite aspect of my profession, and teaching, being in contact with the students. That's my favorite part. Yeah, writing is fine, publishing is rewarding, but it's not comparable to the amount of accomplishment that you get when you know that your students are impacting the community. It's
and
beautiful.
I'm also convinced that through this experience, direct experience in the community and serving, you also shape their professional careers, right? Because that's the moment that they can, as you well said, realize this is for me, this is too tough, this
Yeah,
is not for me. So it's just having this right opportunity at the right moment rather than going into a profession for several years and then realizing, wow, this is not for me. So you're just giving your students the right opportunity at the right moment. So that's
yeah.
just wonderful.
And they're very thankful for that. And also, it's a way for them to get a job. For example, a children's hospital in Dallas, 9 of their 15 interpreters are former students of mine who collaborated with them. So they were there, they saw how they interpret, and they got hired. So it's a way to also get a job, and it's a line that you can add to your CV. Like, I've been in this hospital, or I have translated for Proyecto Inmigrante, or I have translated for Arlington School District, or you name it. Like, we have 35 partners my students can collaborate with. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's great because that's one of the most frustrating points, as you well mentioned before. You finish your degree, but then you have no
Mhm.
experience. But this is already part of your experience. So
It is. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and if we go back to publications, because you also mentioned that publications it's one of the main requirements to get into the academia and to keep yourself into the academia.
Yep.
How difficult is it to publish, to between teaching, having this community service? How do you organize your time and your mental space to be able to write? Every article needs to be original, right? Is not about rephrasing, so
Yeah.
it needs a lot of effort. How do you do this?
Well, there are two different stages in your career: before tenure and after tenure. Before tenure, you are kind of protected in terms of service. So you have less service
Okay.
responsibilities that allows you to have more time for writing. But still, you need to block time. Otherwise, it's like, oh, I have this wonderful idea that I want to do in my class. No, forget about the wonderful idea you want to do in your class. You can do it later. You
Mm.
need to block time and sit down in front of the computer and just write. After tenure, you don't have a clock, although we have 6 years evaluations and an annual evaluation. So you have to be productive. You need to continue writing and publishing. But there's a little bit more flexibility. It's not like if I don't get tenure, I have to be looking for another job. So my recommendation is that, like, okay, I teach Tuesdays and Thursday. I'm gonna do service on Monday, and the rest of the week I am writing. Okay, and you disconnect from the internet, and you just sit, read, and write and edit. Otherwise, it's impossible, because this is a very demanding and stressful profession, and sometimes it's very hard, particularly for new assistant professors, to say no, like, oh, would you like to be part of this committee? And also it happens, diversity counts, and sometimes, like, having a two last names like me, oh, do you want to be part of this committee, because we know we need representation. I'm like, oh, and also they need a woman in the committee. Oh, but you have two. You're a woman. Yes, you know what? No. So you need to say no, because
And
if
to
I go to the
prioritize, right?
committee, I'm not writing.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's sometimes hard. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have clarity on what's important for you. And as you well say, don't put everything in your calendar just because it looks good. Just focus on what you really enjoy also, because otherwise it becomes a burden.
Yeah. That is that you express it very well, Anka.
And I also have an idea about this service community that you do and teaching, because in the end, they are so related with the writing process. So when you write, it's not that you just go into a room and you start and all of a sudden have an idea, and that can happen. Obviously, that's the creative process. But I suppose that your publications are all also reflecting um, experience from what you do in your daily reality as a practical service, right? So you gather, how was this done, how was this implemented, what were the results. I mean, at the University of Alcalá, where I studied my PhD, we were doing, for example, we were visiting a prison, and we were interviewing the prisoners there, a female prison. So we were getting data from them and see how they were communicating with their lawyers and the rest of the staff from the prison whenever they were not able to speak Spanish. So for us, that
Mhm.
was a project, but it gave us a lot of opportunity to write articles and
Yeah. Well,
reflect
my
the reality.
case is very interesting, and it's been a little bit crazy, because my teaching and my publishing or scholarly work they have been separated or
Wow.
dissociated for so long. For example, all the things that I published to get tenure were related to literary journalism
Okay.
and contemporary Mexican and Spanish literature and culture. Okay, while I was teaching translation and interpreting.
So you have to jungle
And
between both
teaching
of them.
community translation, teaching community interpreting, and collaborating with several different nonprofits. Okay, and then after I got tenure, I say, what I'm doing needs to be written. But I was like, I don't have a PhD in translation. I don't know where to start. I mean, but this is good. I mean, I think I should tell this. So finally in 2017 or 18, I say, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna write about this. So
Yeah.
it is a new recent area of research for me. And if people ask me, are you a scholar in translation? No, I'm not. I'm a teacher. Okay, and I'm a practitioner. I do pro bono translation, and I teach my students, and I collaborate with them, and once in a while I sit down and I tell what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, my main field is literature,
Literature.
in particular women authors, feminist authors, and literary journalism. Although I have published in community translation and service learning, because for me they go hand by hand, like they
Exactly.
cannot be separated. You
Mm.
cannot pretend that the community that is in need of community translation is not going to have students helping them. It's like they just they go together. They go together.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the perfect combination: community translation and service learning.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And speaking about funding, uh, apart from your project that might be funded from the university, do you have to obtain additional fundings? I mean, is there a ranking, or how difficult is it to obtain fundings for other projects outside of your university?
Well, outside of the university, I have applied for several grants. I've been a little bit more successful obtaining internal grants.
Okay.
For example, for a project that I had with the Arlington Public Library through a program they lead called Stories to Our Children, my students
Mhm.
translated these stories written by immigrant parents into English. They were originally written in Spanish. So I got funding to publish the translations from my institution, also from the Arlington Public Library, and also from Texas Humanities Grant. They gave us support to do these translations and publish them. So we had some sort of help, but it's always very competitive, particularly in the field of the humanities. I got also a grant to establish, how is it called? Let me think about it. Spanish Writing and Translation Community Center. So we got a seed grant to create this center, but now we are in need of more funding. And I've been privileged and honored to be a part of I'm a finalist of a program called Excelencia in Education, and I have received further funding from them. So it's been also now I can invest it in my translation and interpreting program. So yeah, and I try to apply for federal grants with no
Mhm.
results, but I'll keep trying.
Yeah, yeah,
It's hard. Funding is always hard.
yeah. I can imagine, but never give up. Don't give up.
Oh, I want.
And as we're getting closer to our interview, I have one question which most of the students ask me: shall I pursue a PhD or not?
Okay.
What would be your advice?
Okay, my advice will be you need to pursue your dream. Okay,
Mhm.
if you want to be a doctor, do it. But I won't lie to them. Like, there are no jobs, there are no more tenure track positions.
Yeah.
It's gonna be insane to get in one of those positions, and the academic life is crazy. So I'm very honest,
Mhm.
really honest. So depending on where you are, I will analyze my chances to get a tenure track position. Is that is what you want, but also consider positions outside academia. Okay. The problem is that positions outside academia, usually in our field, do not require a PhD.
Exactly.
So you really need to be aware of this problem, of this situation, that the lack of positions in academia first, and also that companies and the industry usually do not require PhD. So it's a decision that you need to really address. And in my personal case, I did a PhD because I got a grant. I will not be, having three different jobs and doing a PhD. That's my recommendation. Like, go to a university that pays you, okay, to study. But still, sometimes you might not get lucky, or you might not get a grant or a scholarship or full ride. Um, but get some sort of support,
Yeah.
because it's a very long path. It's very
Yes.
hard. So yeah, unfortunately, I know a lot of people say, yeah, it's wonderful. No, no, it's not wonderful. It is
It's
hard,
very challenging.
rewarding.
It's a roller coaster of emotions.
Yep. Hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm honest to my students when they approach me about, hey, I'm considering a PhD, and say, well, consider it twice.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I suppose that everyone appreciates an honest feedback rather than, yes, go do a PhD, it will be great. And then you have another reality
Uh-huh.
stalking you, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. And if we are now finalizing the interview, are there any main takeaways from your professional career, general takeaways that you would like to address to our audience? what would be the main values that characterized your professional journey that could help someone who's starting or someone who has been on a career path but now wants to change it?
Okay, I will tell them, even if you think that what you're studying is not something that you might do for the rest of your life, which has happened to me, eventually all that knowledge will be helpful. Okay, so do not think, oh, I wasted my time, this was worthless. No, someday you say, oh, okay, this is now making sense. Now it has its own place, and I can see why it was okay to continue and to do so. So that's one thing. And also, it's okay to acknowledge and to say, I made a mistake. And it's never too late to look for another kind of job. It's never too late to study. You know, the students that I love the most working with are, students my age or older. That's I need a career change. Or, that was my dream. I never had the chance to go to university, and now I'm doing it. So it's never too late to say, this is not for me. And it's never too late to say, I'm going to study or I'm going to change my career. And do not be afraid. Just do it. Okay. Just do it. It might be hard, of course, but there's always opportunity. And don't regret decisions that you made in the past, because you never know when that knowledge is going to be useful. And change your career. Don't be afraid. Don't.
Perfect. I really like that final message. So thank you so much, Alicia, once again for your time. It was a very lovely conversation. I'm sure that it will be very useful for our audience. And looking forward to hear more about your projects and how they evolve. So let's stay in touch. And thank you so much.
No, thank you, Anka. It's been my pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for the invitation. I had a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
I invite you to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all other major platforms. Subscribe, but also share it with persons who might find it useful.